The Kurdistan region has witnessed many a hard time. Oppressive regimes and internal conflict compelled many Kurds and their families to leave Kurdistan and seek refuge in a foreign land. In this documentary, we look at a generation of Kurds raised in America, seeing how they have balanced their Kurdish identity with their adopted American one.
We left in 1996 when there was a civil war happening between the two major ruling parties in Kurdistan. We were moved to Guam as part of Operation Pacific Haven, which located 5,000 Kurdish families and moved it to Guam, where we settled there for a few months till the U.S. was able to find us homes in the United States. We spent about a few months there and we were all dispersed throughout the states.
We came with a program called the Kurdish Relocation, I believe. And we left in December of '96. We were taken to Turkey. From there we spent one night at a refugee camp. Some people spent longer times, but my family, we spent one night there. And then we were taken to the island of Guam, which is a U.S. territory. Over there, we spent roughly 4 months while our paperwork and stuff was being processed. And then from there, due to our sponsor, the Kurdish Human Rights Watch, we were relocated to Fairfax, Virginia.
Many of the Kurdish families were moved around a few times when they arrived in the United States, before settling in a city that was to become their permanent home away from home.
I was 5 when we moved to America, and we were refugees. So we were moved through Turkey, and then to Guam, and then to New York, Connecticut, and then we finally moved to Virginia, which is where we live now. And Kurdistan was in pretty bad shape when we left. We didn't really have any electricity or water, and food was kind of low.
I had just turned 8 years old. I remember as we were selling the things in our house in Kurdistan, it was also my birthday.
We were all in tents in Turkey, and then all of us were moved to Guam after Turkey. So in Guam we were studying, learning how to speak English, and yeah, we just got to experience what Guam was like. That was the first time we saw palm trees and kind of beachy weather.
I was originally settled after Guam in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where there was only a few families, Kurdish families. I was 11 at the time, and my family decided to move to Nashville, Tennessee, where there has a larger Kurdish population. Currently, Nashville has close to 12,000 Kurdish residents, and it's the largest Kurdish community in the U.S.
For those who had left Kurdistan at a young age, the most difficult thing they had to encounter when settling into America was starting school, and starting it in a language that they were not familiar with, as their parents worked to build a foundation for their new life.
Coming here like anybody else, I don't think anyone came here well off. It was really hard for everyone to get used to this lifestyle, because this is a very fast-paced life here, and it was really difficult at first. And my dad had to work 2 jobs, so did my mom, and a lot of us in school it was very challenging just to learn the English language. Yeah, so everything was really difficult at first, but over time things smoothed out.
What were the main challenges when you came here? How difficult was it as an 8-year-old?
As an 8-year-old, I don't know, it's just, living in Kurdistan, we never met anyone that wasn't non-Kurdish, and so when I came here, you saw people from all sorts of background, and, everything was like a culture shock pretty much, and so just getting used to the different people and learning the English language, I think that was probably the most difficult thing for me, because I'd be in class I think it was in 2nd or 3rd grade. I would sit there not knowing what anybody was talking about, and that was always not so fun.
The major challenge was starting school, and language was the major challenge, and being able to fit in with young kids was a major challenge, because most of us that came there, we didn't speak English. We had very few understanding of the culture, so just getting into schools was a bit difficult for us.
The very first thing that we had to do since I came in as a teenager was the barrier of learning the language and adapting into this culture, finding friends, blending in. That was the very first challenge for us, but thankfully we did it in a short period of time. We kept touch with all of our Kurdish fellows.
It wasn't too hard blending in here, as Northern Virginia or the DC metropolitan area is very diverse. So it wasn't like I was standing out of the crowd. There's people from all ethnicities, religions, and backgrounds in this area. So, and the groups of people that were friends with me were all mixed. So I didn't face too many challenges at that age. I believe I was too young to care too much about the cultural differences.
You came here when you were 2. You're obviously very, very young. How hard have you found it to maintain your Kurdish roots but live the American way of life?
I think my parents actually did a really well job of keeping us with the Kurdish society, the language, the food, and just the culture. Like, I don't think it's really hard for me to, like, I know I came at a really young age, but I still have my Kurdish roots.
I think the biggest challenge for any Kurdish person living in the United States, whether they were born and raised here, is a challenge of balancing dual identities. You're always struggling to maintain your Kurdish language but fit into a culture that's not like the culture your parents are always talking about back home. So there were some challenges in the beginning, but I think I might have had an advantage because I was born here, so it was easier for me to slowly sort of slip into that balance. There was some, tug and pull here and there, but eventually you come into your own, and I think the struggle is something necessary for any human being. I think youth everywhere face their own set of unique circumstances, and it's no different for us here.
But you still remember like who you are and where you come from, and you also have like your parents pressuring you to be some way, and you have your community and like what the community thinks of you as well, and all of those things factor into who you are. And at the same time, you're trying to fit in with the kids you go to school with, trying to make friends, and it's really hard to do that when there's certain things you can't do in Kurdish culture that are perfectly acceptable in American culture, and it's really hard to balance the two, and you have to decide almost what more of do you want to be.
With my parents, I kind of lucked out. They've been here for about 30 years, so they've had 30 years to sort of assimilate to American culture, whereas a lot of other Kurdish people with parents that came here 10 or 20 years ago might still be struggling with that balance. So my parents have a very healthy balance in terms of cultural expectations, but realistic expectations given where we live. Maintaining our language, for example, is their #1 priority. Remembering our culture and history is another one, but still within a very unique Americanness that gives us sort of a well-roundedness that maybe other Kurdish youth don't quite have yet.
قرارمان نامنو خێزانەکەم قەرارمان ئێمە لە ماوەوە کوردی قسەیان لەگەڵا بکەین ئانج لە دەرەوە بە ئینگلیزیەکە فێر بن لەبەرەوەی کەڵچەری خۆمانیان لەبیرنە چییە وەدا زمانی دایک زمانێکی پیرۆزە زۆر شیرینە لای هەموو کەسێ.
How difficult or easy has it been to maintain your Kurdish language?
It's been easy in the sense that I thought it was easy when I was growing up here. I spoke with my parents in fluent Kurdish. I spoke with the community in fluent Kurdish, but because the community is made up of people from so many different parts of Kurdistan, you end up with this slang Kurdish that only people in the diaspora really understand. And when you go back home and you use certain words, they'll be like, wait, what did you say? That word is from this city, but you're from this city, so why are you speaking that way? In the bazaars, they pick you out, very easily. They know you're not from around there, and yet here we are under this assumption that our Kurdish is very good. But in terms of the correct spoken Kurdish, unfortunately, you'll watch these news channels and you won't quite understand what they're saying. So the proper Kurdish is something that I think is lacking right now.
We speak Kurdish at home, not so much as we should, and that's because, like I think I said this earlier, where because my parents were always out working and we're always out at school and hanging out with non-Kurds, we always spoke English, and so coming home we kind of like we all kind of just spoke in English, which was a little bit more comfortable to speak in.
A common concern of Kurdish families living in the diaspora is that their children will forget their mother tongue by virtue of the fact that their surrounds compel them to speak the language that is most dominant. As a result, Kurdish is spoken significantly less often.
At one point I had a problem with the language because I spent most of my days at school, and after that I had after-school activities, and later on in my high school and college career I had to work, so most of my day was spent speaking English with coworkers, with classmates, so it was a bit difficult, but thankfully I was able to work with different Kurdish organizations and get integrated back into the overall Kurdish society in the US, where I was not able to preserve my language and relearn my specific dialect. I was able to pick up on other Kurdish dialects, because in the US it's not just Kurds from one part of Kurdistan, it's Kurds from all over. So it allows you to not only learn about yourself and preserve, it also allows you to learn about Kurds from different parts of Kurdistan.
Because of my parents, we always spoke Kurdish at home. Like I told you, I learned English pretty quick at that young age. But at home, it was always Kurdish. And we were up to date with Kurdish current events. My parents always taught us the history, our background. My older sister and brother, they would teach me some things as well. They studied up to high school in Kurdistan. I try to keep in touch with some Kurdish literature. I forced myself to not forget the little writing that I learned in elementary school. And I practiced over the years, and I still practice today. Of course, I'm not as great as the average Kurdish student in Kurdistan, but I can read and write in Kurdish still today, 16 years later. And I've gotten into higher levels of reading and literature, such as Kurdish poetry from different regions as well.
Why did you tell her?
My siblings, we do talk at home sometimes like it's half and half, 50% Kurdish, 50% English, you know?
Couple words here,
Sometimes-
couple words there.
Sometimes you think about a Kurdish word, you want to say it, you don't know, like it doesn't come to you. Like, you think about it, you can just say it in English and you get the message, you know?
Yeah, we'll do like the half sentence, like go put the kori on the stove.
Yeah.
You know, okay.
Try to mix it up. So.
But we teach each other too. I know, like you've taught us a couple of words, and we kind of we make fun of it that sometimes we don't understand each other, but we attempt to learn it.
Parents of children growing up in America are trying hard to ensure that Kurdish traditions and customs are still present in the family home, if nowhere else. One way has been the cuisine and language.
My mom makes like rice, brinjal fasulye all the time, so we definitely keep in touch with the cuisine. Me and my sister, we were in a dance team for like a Kurdish dance team. We even did like a dance team for like George Mason University for International Week to display our dances. So I was definitely a part of that, and I love Kurdish food. And I think the language is the hardest to keep. Like we speak Kurdish at home, and my parents, my mom and dad are always encouraging us to speak more Kurdish, but it's hard to maintain all the words. Like for example, if I'm talking to somebody who's a little bit older, like a lot of the words don't come as easy for me, so I'm always like, and then I'll mix English and Kurdish. But yeah, I definitely want to maintain my language too.
On a daily basis, we ate Kurdish food at home, thanks to my mom, wonderful chef. We spoke Kurdish at home. However, at the same time, although we were speaking Kurdish at home, everywhere else during the day, we left the house early in the morning, saw each other later in the evening. Some nights, because initially my parents were working multiple jobs just to catch up to the rest of society here. Some nights I would not see my parents. The Kurdish language, we speak it. My sister is excellent, my brother, the rest of the family. For me, being that I didn't get much education in it, in Kurdish literature, I would say the language would be good and bad, because we spoke it at home, but most of my day I was not at home.
What was it like for your parents as an older generation to adapt and adjust to American life?
I think it's still challenging for them, especially since like when we first came here, they started working, and so the language still is difficult for them. You know, they didn't have the experience that we did, you know, going to school, learning the language, and but for them, even now, you know, any English that they picked up is because of work. And they're still, I mean, I feel like they're here because of us. They don't want us to lose that opportunity of having that American dream, and so they're pretty much sacrificing their you know, the rest of their lives, just so that, you know, we continue to live a more prosperous life.
For my parents, their major issue was how to preserve their culture and at the same time allow us to integrate with the American society.
I totally understand where they're coming from because we moved here and they were older when we moved here, so it's hard for them to like trust a country that they don't know, and you know, they want to obviously protect their children, so it's just a natural reaction for them to be more protective, and I feel like that was a good thing for us because we were protected and loved by our family, but at the same time I'm sure it like held us back from a lot of experiences. It's hard for them to understand me and my identity, even though like we see each other every day and we talk, but it's that struggle that they don't realize that I'm going through, like trying to please them and keep my roots and also fit in. It's not like I don't want to keep my Kurdish roots. It's that I have to adapt, and it's hard to do that when I have two sides pulling me.
The Kurdish youth in America, encouraged by their parents, have managed to find ways to keep in touch and maintain their Kurdish identity by forming organizations and holding events that recognize and celebrate Kurdish traditions and the history and culture of their homeland.
My parents were very active in the Kurdish community, as I think a lot of really old parents were that came here 20 or 30 years ago. Politically, they were protesting all the time, and so I was very much involved in that from the age of 2, protesting for Halabja onward. But as I grew older and I, went to the university, I started the Kurdistan Student Organization, which was the first Kurdish organization that was recognized by a university on the East Coast. I was the president and founder. And then I joined the Kurdish Youth Club, where I was the first head of education, and I stayed that for I think about 4 years. And we did different things. We had conferences and seminars, we had fundraisers, we went on field trips to George Washington's house to learn about, him as a leader and how to, inspire ourselves as Kurds to sort of not become the next George Washington per se, but to become the next, effective Kurdish leader within our own communities. So we focus on a variety of different things to sort of reach each individual Kurd that has different focuses and interests.
I am involved with quite a few Kurdish organizations. I'm the president of Kurdish American Youth Organization, and I'm also involved and I'm part of a committee when we have a yearly festival which covers different aspects of Kurdish culture, literature, and the academic side of Kurdistan, where we bring youth from all parts of the U.S. To a specific city where it has a major Kurdish population, where we discuss, we start discussions among youth, where youth can learn from each other about Kurdistan.
The cause of us, creating these organizations was this fear that we were beginning to lose our history and culture, we were forgetting it, and then by extension our kids would forget it as well. And that's a big fear that our parents have for us and that we also have for the coming generation. And we felt like being here in the United States, we have such a responsibility to our Kurdish families back home to sort of maintain our identity and to better ourselves given the opportunities that we have here.
After joining these organizations, it helped me a lot to get my roots back, to get my language back.
I've never been back to Kurdistan. I was born and raised here. So I think for me personally, I try my best to be with the Kurdish youth here just so I can know what it's kind of like back home and try to balance both at the same time, because I've only been in America, never been outside, so try to keep it with my roots, with my family and the Kurdish youth here, and try to be as involved as possible.
أو كرداتي كأمان أي كان زوي فرق لقل أوي كان أو حسبونا بكرداتي يمان جواز لقل أوي
بس أمان كم ترى بس يما لخواب زيابي من وقو فخرنا كم شو كان عائلي يمن براسي أماني مني تفرحشاني على قلبه ما بقول هادي يعني اشتواء كان كدوهيا بومني بس كان براسي من نمتو أنا بيكم هو
بس لا تشوف أنا كليرا يعني زور باشا يعني اشتيك إيميل يعني بيش ما نوتون يعني أو اشتيان كده بوي هالي بجابك بتشب بوكر يشبع مثلا مناسبة غلط جاء كان من مناسب فيستيفال كان خلقوا كان يعني مش بيش ما نوتن براقة خوان أوشتانيا جروب أوشتانيا بيجي هنا يعني خوش يعني تقول ديرة كمنالكم خوي واقع يعني هستي تياك أو كردة هستكاك كردة.
By joining these organizations and being around Kurdish people, we kind of created our own little Kurdistan here.
The engagement of the youth in activities and events that talk about Kurdish culture and history is striking. The attachment they still have for their homeland, despite leaving it all those years ago, or for some not even seeing it at all, is still a strong one.
Since my teenage years, I've been pretty active with the community. I attend all community events, whether good or bad. All our festivities for the holidays, Nowruz, Jezhin. I also joined the youth groups that were available. And I actually, in the recent years, we founded and established new and more powerful youth groups in the area, the Kurdish Youth Club. There are other youth groups in Central and West America, Kurdish American Youth Organization. I have friends there. And then more importantly, the Kurdish Youth Festival, which we've had for 3 years now, has been the most successful in uniting Kurds from all around the United States into one event.
We're a very tight-knit community. We attend the same events together. Parents will force their kids to come along, if only to maintain that identity and to have something Kurdish to look forward to once or twice a year. So I think we've all come to the realization that we don't really have the luxury of choosing communities. We all have to sort of stick together.
We have one common goal, which is to serve the Kurdish community. I'm very Kurdish, but I wasn't so interested in talking about my Kurdish roots. But after being in the organization, I've learned to really embrace my culture.
Many of the youths have been able to visit their homeland, see the progress it has achieved and the opportunities it can offer. It has also allowed them to explore their identity and culture firsthand.
I've been back home twice, once in 2005, which was, I guess, 3 years after the Iraq War started, and then again in 2011, end of 2010, beginning of 2011. I do think that we have a lot of commonalities. Being in the diaspora, you always have this romantic vision of what Kurdistan must be like. Because I didn't go until 2005, I would always see it on Kurdistan TV or Kurdsat, and I would see these great mountains and villages, and I thought, oh, this is so romantic, how beautiful, I would love to go there. And then I went to Erbil and I saw these beautiful high-rises, things that I never would have imagined 15 years ago. So yes, I think we do have a lot more in common than we think we do. I think we have a lot of the same goals and aspirations. We both, want to maintain our culture and history. We both want to pursue, I think the majority of young Kurds right now want to pursue higher education. But then there's a lot of cultural differences as well, which is to be expected in any society. But I think the more I go back, the more I realize I have a lot more in common than I do differences. And also, I think a lot of the social things that are sort of acceptable here, walking out with a group of people that are mixed, I think is different in certain parts of Kurdistan that's not quite societally acceptable. Even women driving, I didn't see much of that yet in different parts of Kurdistan, whereas here you just sort of get in your car and you go. Here it's a very individualistic society. There's a very heavy focus on our end on the role of family, but at the same time it's you and your aspirations. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps, to become what you want to be. In Kurdistan it's very family oriented, very community oriented. And so here in the diaspora we're always going up and down with that balance.
It was amazing. It's definitely not the same Kurdistan that I left. Like I said, I grew up in a very traditional Kurdish household, so I still have like very Kurdish mentality. And I think when I went back to Kurdistan, I felt like I was more Kurdish than some of my relatives, and because we left in 1997, we still had that same mentality. And so going back and you see them a little bit more liberal kind of surprised me.
I was back for 2 weeks just a few months ago, and I didn't have an issue of finding a social activity that I would be doing, and I was very much busy the 2 weeks I was there. Every day there was something to do, and there wasn't anything that I didn't find there as I could find here.
I do feel at home when I'm there. I could easily walk around the bazaar and I know where everything is. I feel at home. I like to be one with the locals. And I don't even want to consider them as another people. This is my people, that's my home. So I feel that it is as much mine as it is theirs. It's just nice to know that you have a background. You also live somewhere else. You had another life somewhere else.
When you were in Kurdistan, did you feel that was home to you, or is home in America?
I think home is in America. I mean, I know that's my homeland. Like, I'm not, I know that's the place I came from, and but I felt like, how you have that feeling of relief, like, okay, finally I'm home from a trip. That's how I felt.
I love the culture there. Like, everything, just being with your family is seriously amazing. And the culture there, and it just feels like home,
If someone was to ask you about your identity and ask you where you come from or where your roots are, your origins, how would you answer them?
I say I'm from Kurdistan for sure, but I think they can tell. They're like, oh, you don't have an accent, you don't act like some people will say, like, oh, you look white, or something else. And I'm just like, I'm Kurdish American. I'd say I'm a little bit of both, and hopefully I take the positive things from both, and that's who I am.
I think on some days I feel more American, and on some days I feel more Kurdish. It just depends on my mood or the subject, or what's going on overseas that I feel like maybe some Americans here don't understand, and what's going on here that I feel some Kurds don't understand. So it's an up and down. I feel Kurdish and I feel American, and I think that's just the way it's always going to be.
But if someone was to ask you, would you ever prefer one over the other?
Not really, no. I feel like I wouldn't be completely Kurdish or myself if I didn't have that Americanness to me. And I don't think I would be a true Kurd in America if I didn't have that Americanness to me. You need to have that healthy balance. You're never going to be completely one or the other. Kurdish by ethnicity, but American by birth. And so it's a really cool balance to have and a really cool perspective to have, not living inside Kurdistan.
I feel like I live in two different worlds. With Kurdish people I'm one person, and then with Americans I'm a different person. And only because, we still have differences, and so I try to balance both.
It's really hard to answer that question, what are you? I'm still Kurdish, but I grew up here, so I have an attachment to the ES.
I think we're a minority among the Kurdish youth around here to think that we feel more Kurdish than American. Because I feel like the fact that we're in organizations, that we're friends with Kurdish people, like most of my main friends are Kurdish people. My grandma is here, so that makes it easier for me to stick to my Kurdish roots. But I don't think it's like that for everybody else, because I'm meeting a lot of Kurdish people who I didn't even know lived here. And when I talk to them, they're like, "Oh, you're the first Kurdish person I've met. You're the. I didn't know we had an organization. I didn't know this and that." And I think we feel very Kurdish because we have, our families made sure we connected with each other, made friends with people our age, but I don't think it's the majority in this area. I don't think there's that many people who feel more Kurdish than American.
For most of the youth, their identity is one in limbo, but not one that conflicts. They can balance both equally and enjoy the benefits of both, but know that they can never feel quite one or the other in its entirety.
Being American does not mean you're not anything else, right? Being American allows you to be anything else you want as well. So I've kept a pretty good balance between being Kurdish. Like I said, I practice all the Kurdish things. I speak Kurdish. Being American, I'm a very good American as well. I think I'm very patriotic. This is as much my home as Kurdistan is. And I've taken an oath to this country. I took an oath to get my citizenship, and now for the rest of my life I'll honor that oath. I'm an American. But that does not mean I'm not Kurdish. That doesn't mean I've forgotten my background. And I've kept a good balance between both identities.
All of us here, when we go to Kurdish parties, we represent ourselves as wearing Kurdish clothes, because that is a part of our culture. No one is ashamed of wearing a Kurdish clothes. None of us are ashamed of saying that I'm Kurdish, I was born there, or I was raised there, or whatnot. And we have always kept that identity with us that has made ourselves proud, each other proud, our parents, families, and everyone else around us. But yes, it has also become a challenge when we have other friends, and there is a culture here, a Western culture that we have to blend in, and we had to create and this is from my personal experience. I have not followed the American culture, nor I have followed the Kurdish culture fully, but I have created a new culture for myself that I have taken the best of both worlds, and that became my culture. So I am a part of both worlds.
Whenever I do go to Kurdistan, I start missing America. When I'm in America, I start missing Kurdistan. There are certain things about my life, how the things I do or say, or my opinions on certain things. It is because I grew up in America. And then there are things here, it's because I grew up in Kurdistan. So I'm always stuck between a rock and a hard place.
How Kurdish do you feel versus how American you feel?
I feel more Kurdish.
I feel more Kurdish.
I feel more Kurdish.
Definitely.
Okay, do you think it's because of the upbringing? I mean, how often do you guys speak in Kurdish? Attend Kurdish events wearing Kurdish attire?
I don't think it's
Kurdish food in the house?
Kurdish is the only language allowed in our house, so
that is the only
it's either that or silence. Take your pick.
Yeah. You are a Kurdish person when you're inside that house. You're not an American Kurd, you're Kurdish. And in our household, our parents are very key on making sure that we understand and celebrate our culture through our language, through our cuisine, through our events, fashion, just everything in general. That umbrella. Of course, America does have influence on us, of course, but you know, at the end of the day, like when me and Bahar went to Kurdistan, you know, we felt like we were home. And it was a very, very warm feeling, like I'm finally home. You know, I see the flag raised and I'm like, this is where I belong.